So, good morning, everyone. I wanted to talk today about a subject that grabbed my attention as a consequence of a documentary that was filmed in the UK recently on the network marketing industry. It was actually done by the BBC, and it was not a favorable perspective on network marketing. Some points of it were relevant and important, and some were positive, of course. But the overall temperature was fairly frosty and fairly cool. And one of the points that they highlighted was the number of people that actually succeed financially in this business is very, very small. I wanted to address that because they took statistics from a couple of big companies, billion-dollar companies, and they also took statistics, I think, potentially from the DSA. So I want to be quite candid in saying that according to those statistics, there would be some accuracy there that those that have great checks are relatively small compared to the millions of people that are involved in network marketing. So I wanted to talk about why is that, and more importantly, what is that a reflection of? And is there something that I can do personally to turn those numbers to my favor and get a better outcome or result in my own business? I think this is a very, very important subject for us to consider because any of you that are recruiting and prospecting in an active, engaged, meaningful way may come across this very concern in the process of conducting business. And you may not know how to answer it. And some of us may not understand that statistic to begin with, but may have a feel for it, where we go, I'm not making much money, perhaps, and people in my group, my downline, maybe aren't making much money either. And maybe I look around to my peers, and what am I seeing? And maybe there's a concern there that starts to feed a little bit if we don't understand what it's saying and how we can reverse that or address it, or at least give it context. So, statistically, is it true that only a small percentage of people in network marketing make over $100,000 a year? The answer is yes, a small percentage do, a small percentage. There is a reason for that. Again, I saw a blog that I'm subscribed to by a marketing professional who's also an illustrator. And one of the points that he was making in this blog was, it's not just, gone are the days where you would have data to analyze. Now it's all about what data you analyze, making sure that you have proper context in the numbers that you look at, because we are data saturated. So what data are we looking at? And we need to make sure that we interpret it correctly. I'll give you an example that there are a lot of people that will recruit their customers. Yeah, and as a consequence of that, that customer becomes a business builder by definition because they signed a distributor contract, and thus that brings down, on average, the percentage of people that are earning a decent income, because these people didn't join the business to earn an income, they joined to get a product. But someone that doesn't know how to retail effectively will recruit their customers in order to give them a better price, thinking that will help them close the sale. What it does is maybe it gives them a better price, maybe on a one-time order, frustratingly, because many of these customers will place one or two orders and then stop. Yeah. So they actually end up not making much money because they don't get the retail profit. And the customer who is looking like a distributor, but not behaving like one, doesn't make an income either. And that brings the whole percentage point down as to what the average earnings are per person. So that's something to consider as well. Of course, there are a lot of people that join and do nothing. And I'm sure anyone that has been recruiting in a meaningful way will have seen this from time to time, that they've even signed up people that haven't even placed an order. They've not even acted like a customer. And yet they've signed up and paid the $99 joining fee, but haven't actually done anything. And people sometimes join, I don't know for what reason, when they do nothing. Maybe it's an impulse decision. But that also skews the numbers, doesn't it? It makes sometimes doing things like that, if we don't do our business correctly, we can be guilty of making a mockery of the industry, because we start to skew the numbers. We start to make things look like not what they should be. And that's something to consider as well. So, we can look at the data like that and go, okay, maybe we can increase that number of people that are earning 100,000 out of those that are maybe the active business builders, and get a different percentage point there. The reality is that percentage point of people that will be earning over 100,000 will still be relatively small. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that those things that we need to change, like I just discussed, revolutionize the way our businesses would operate. And I do wish that more MLMs, and I'm speaking as a former corporate person here, would have the mechanism in their own businesses to segment and differentiate between customers and consultants. Even the software providers for the industry don't tend to have that kind of facility as much as they should, because too many people, they've kind of done what everyone supported, what a lot of the companies just do, which is just let everyone sign up as distributors. So an unhealthy practice has led to more unhealthy practice. But I want to touch on a broader issue here, which I think is really so much more important. And I'm going to quote from a book that I've been reading. Mike kind of snapped me reading this in Italy. It's called The 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. It's a fantastic book. I wholeheartedly recommend it. He's a very direct, intelligent, informed thinker. He's a professor of psychology. He's Canadian, actually. Mike, I think you probably already know that. But he shares a point here, which I think is really, really important. He uses the example initially of lobsters, crustaceans, and he uses it to illustrate a very important point. He says in the lobster world, they will vie, the two male lobsters will vie for position as the dominant leader of their group of lobsters. I don't know what a group of lobsters is called. Forgive my ignorance on that. And he said, but this is what happens. They'll have a fight. They'll get involved in a battle, and it's a battle for supremacy, for hierarchy, for dominance. He said, and then one will win, and they take everything. They take the prime spot in the best place for shelter. They get the best food. He said all of the female lobsters, when they recognize that one as the dominant male, they start vying for their attention because they're going to be the best one to provide them offspring, all of that kind of stuff. He said, but what's interesting is once that lobster has gotten that prominent position, he said it becomes a winner takes all in the lobster world. What happens is it becomes easier for that lobster to win. And the one that lost the battle, even though he may go in to fight again, the chances of him succeeding are significantly reduced. He said that the brain function actually changes, and it produces less serotonin in the defeated lobster, and the victor creates more serotonin, which as a result makes them posture more, makes them come across more confident. The other one is more diminished, more subservient, and it means the loser loses more frequently, the winner just keeps on winning. And he goes, it's a winner-takes-all environment in that lobster world. He said, but it's the same in the human world. And this is why I loved this when I read it, because I thought this attack that often comes towards network marketing, and Dave Ray Henry makes a good point there. Being a raw diamond is good for your brain. It feeds it with serotonin. It makes you stand up taller, makes you square your shoulders more. It makes you more confident, more optimistic, and you attract more success because of what it does to this. Yeah. But of course, you've got to get that working first in order to get there. We'll touch on that. But this attack on network marketing about this unequal distribution that can be observed is actually a microcosm of what we see in every facet of our human experience. Isn't that interesting? What network marketing does is it takes humanity, puts it under the microscope, and we see it in all its glory, and sometimes not all of its glory. But let me share with you some interesting statistics that he takes out here. And I have to say that the odds in network marketing compared to what we experience in the rest of our lives are significantly better. Significantly better. He said, it's a winner-take-all in the lobster world, just as it is in human societies, where the top 1% have as much loot as the bottom 50%, where the richest 85 people have as much as the bottom 3.5 billion. Now that is an offensive statistic, isn't it? 85 people in the world have as much combined wealth as 3.5 billion people. That's a shocking statistic. Now, the distribution of wealth is significantly more even spread in a network marketing business than it is across the rest of the planet in every and any financial environment. Because look at that statistic. That is a global statistic. He said the same brutal principle of unequal distribution applies outside of the financial domain. So you could say, well, maybe that just applies financially, economically, and that's because of maybe people's ability, people's opportunities, so on and so forth. He said, however, it doesn't just apply with finances. He said the majority of scientific papers are published by a very small group of scientists. A tiny proportion of musicians produce almost all of the recorded commercial music. And we can see that, can't we? We have names that we're all familiar with across the world, yet there are literally hundreds of thousands of musicians that are playing everywhere. Just a handful of authors sell all the books. 1.5 million separately titled books sell every year in the USA. However, only 500 of that 1.5 million books, only 500 sell more than 100,000 copies. That's crazy then, isn't it? He said, similarly, just 4 classical composers, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, wrote almost all of the music played, classical music, played by modern orchestras. Just 4 of those composers. You know, most of the classical music we listen to now comes from those 4 composers. He said the same thing applies outside of these other areas. He said, let me go on here, just give me 1 second. He said it also applies, not just in these environments, to populations of cities. A very small number have almost all the people. You look at geography, it applies there. And the frequency of words, the language that we speak. 90% of communication occurs using just 500 words. Yet there are thousands of words available to us in our language. So he said it's sometimes known as the Matthew principle, derived from what might be the harshest statement ever attributed to Christ. To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. It's an interesting principle, that, isn't it? So if you get on the right side of the coin, things can start to work out much better. But you can see how the way that our society has operated, not just now, the reason he uses the lobster is to highlight that this is perhaps one of the oldest creatures on the planet. It's a basic crustacean. It happens with them. It's happened for thousands of years because it has sustained their existence. And it happens to us. It happens in geography. It happens in science. It happens in creativity, in art, in music. It happens in economics, in finance. It happens with everything. It happens in language and communication. Across the board, in every way, we have an unequal distribution of opportunity and an unequal distribution of wealth. So what do we do about that? Is there a solution? Well, first of all, like I said, I'd like to highlight that as I look at those statistics, I see a far greater opportunity within the environment of network marketing for us to thrive and succeed than I do across the general populace of the human race. Yeah, we've got an opportunity here where we can turn opportunity to our advantage, take control, seize the moment, and do something about it. However, I don't want us to be like one of those defeated lobsters, where maybe we've risen up for the battle to fight for a spot, lose that fight, and then shrink down, and then get into that situation where our brain subconsciously tells us, you're defeated. You're not the number one guy, and you're not going to be. And as a consequence of that, it produces less serotonin. It feeds our brain with less of the happy hormone. And what do we do as a result? That principle, that law of attraction that Mike so eloquently speaks about and has done for so many years, works against us. Because we can say cognitively, I understand that principle, and I'm going to put good things out there. I'm going to aspire to better things. I'm going to have a better perspective on how I confront the world. But subconsciously, emotionally, if I feel defeated, then subconsciously my shoulders will start to slouch. Yeah. Now his solution, Jordan Peterson's solution for this, he says, is to square your shoulders, put your head back, and stand up tall. And he says, you do that. He said, and remarkable things can happen. He said, are you telling me that just doing that alone is going to provide the solution, where you're going to go from being one of the lower percentile people that just gets disadvantaged, well, one of those hundreds of thousands of authors that doesn't create 100,000 book sales? Am I going to be one of these many musicians that never gets to get a commercial hit? Am I going to be one of these many creatives that never gets to see my work published? Or am I going to be one of these many networkers that doesn't get to that next rank that turns things around? Well, the way to do that, the starting point, square the shoulders, stand up taller. This is what he says about it. I want to read it out. Oh, I just pulled off the wrong page here. 1 second. This is what he says. I'm going to find now that I've lost my spot. Okay, I've lost my mark here, so forgive me. But he says he says to stand up straight. This is it. He says it's not just about posture, physical posture. He said it's also metaphysical, meaning it's not just what happens in our body, but also what happens in our mind. In our mind, we stand up straight, we square our shoulders, we look forwards with confidence. He said standing up physically also implies and invokes and demands standing up metaphysically. Standing up means voluntarily accepting the burden of being. Accepting the burden of being. Your nervous system responds in an entirely different manner when you face the demands of life voluntarily. I like that. We all have demands of life that we experience, but we don't always voluntarily embrace them. Sometimes they just get thrown at us and our arms aren't out, ready to catch them. So we just find ourselves getting hit with life and blown about with every wind of turbulence that comes our way, versus owning it, embracing it, and responding. He said you respond to a challenge instead of bracing for a catastrophe. He said you see the gold of dragon hordes instead of shrinking in terror from the all too real fact of the dragon. I like that. You step forward to take your place in the dominance hierarchy and occupy your territory, manifesting your willingness to defend, expand, and transform it. That can all occur practically or symbolically as a physical or as a conceptual restructuring. So it really starts in our head, doesn't it? We can turn things around and become the dominant lobster, so to speak, if we are willing to stand up metaphysically in our head, square our shoulders, embrace life, and take responsibility for the challenges that come. He says to stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitable order. It means adopting the burden of self-conscious vulnerability and accepting the end of the unconscious paradise of childhood, where finitude and mortality are only dimly comprehended. I love that. He gets very wonderfully poetic as he goes on. But he says, to stand up straight, I'll finish with this, with your shoulders back, means building the ark that protects the world from the flood, guiding your people through the desert after they've escaped the tyranny, making your way from comfortable home and country, and speaking the prophetic word to those who ignore the widows and the children. It means shouldering the cross that marks the X, the place where you and being intersect. It means casting dead, rigid, and too tyrannical order back into the chaos in which it was generated. It means withstanding the ensuing uncertainty and establishing in consequence a better and more meaningful and more productive order. So, he said, attend carefully to your posture. Quit drooping and hunching around. Speak your mind. Put your desires forward as if you had a right to them, at least the same right as others. I love this. Ladies and gentlemen, the solution for getting out of this burden of unequal distribution that exists across the human race and has done for centuries is to take personal responsibility for our lives, square our shoulders, stand up tall, and take on board whatever comes our way, but look for the opportunities, speak our mind, put forth our ideas, recognize that they have value, and do that with confidence and conviction. It will take some practice. It will take some time. It may take some rewiring up here and a few positive experiences to build the confidence so that as a result of that, we can start to grow. Because that's what happens, isn't it? We grow in confidence. We don't suddenly go from here to up here in confidence overnight. It happens with experience, and it happens a little bit at a time. But as we take those steps forward, I believe that we can have a significant change for good in our own personal experience of life and our own personal experience in the Niken business. But it does require something of us personally, personal responsibility for what comes our way. Let's not fall into the trap of being one of the 99% that just do all right, that meander through life. I believe everyone on this call and everyone that is in Niken, that joined, that is an active business builder in Niken, is here because they don't want to be the 99% that don't get published, that don't get recordings, that have a limited vocabulary and a limited opportunity of life, that live in the wastelands of society. They want to have bread on the table, and they want it to be good bread. They want it to be nicely buttered, and they want it to be looking very good. They want some of the better things in life. One, not because they're being selfish or greedy, but because they know that it's their right. They're entitled to it if they pursue it. And it is. It's everybody's right. We all are of equal value and worth on this planet. We don't come with equal opportunity. But in Niken, we've all got an equal opportunity to succeed if we're willing to let the serotonin flow. Stand a little taller, square our shoulders, and become the victorious lobster. So there's my thoughts for today. I hope that's helped. I hope that each of us can come away today and just look for ways to square the shoulders. And each of us, that will be is a little bit different. Yeah? Because what I find is the things that scare me most are the indicators of where I need to square my shoulders. Yeah? Don't square them where they're already squared. Yeah? Because they're already squared. The job is done there. Recognize where I feel vulnerable, where I feel nervous, where maybe I'm inclined to quieten up and not open my mouth. Maybe that's when I need to say something. Maybe if I'm nervous to make that particular phone call or reach out to that particular person, maybe that's when I need to do it. That's my squaring of the shoulders. Yeah, we know where it is. Where we square our shoulders is often where our fear resides. But when we do that repeatedly, confidence grows, we become a better person, we become a stronger person, and opportunity then really starts to come into our path. And that's what we all want, isn't it? So, love you all very much. And I'll see you next week, of course, if not before. Take care, everyone.